Could you dance with me? My ex is watching. Claire Bennett whispered the words so quietly they nearly disappeared beneath the soft violin music drifting through the Grand Astoria ballroom. Her fingers trembled around the stem of a champagne glass she could never afford to touch if she weren't working the event. Across the polished marble floor, under chandeliers that glittered like frozen waterfalls, Ryan Mercer laughed beside a tall brunette wrapped in silver satin. The sound hit Claire harder than she expected. 3 years together reduced to a smile he now gave someone else. Worse than that, he had seen her. She knew it from the smug tilt of his mouth. The room smelled like expensive perfume, old money, and roses flown in from somewhere she would probably never visit. Men in tailored tuxedos discussed investments worth more than entire neighborhoods, while waiters moved silently through the sea of diamonds and black silk. Claire had spent the last 6 hours pretending to be invisible. That was the rule in rooms like this. Smile politely. Keep your head down. Never remind rich people that someone refills their glasses. But Ryan had shattered that illusion the second he walked in. He had once promised her forever in a tiny apartment with leaking windows and broken heat. Then she lost her office job during budget cuts. Her mother's medical bills piled higher than their rent, and suddenly forever became inconvenient. Ryan disappeared into a world of luxury networking parties and influencer girlfriends, while Claire picked up double shifts carrying trays for people who barely looked at her face. Now fate had dropped them into the same ballroom under a ceiling painted with gold leaf and clouds. Claire felt heat crawl into her cheeks as Ryan whispered something to the woman beside him. The brunette glanced over and smirked. Claire already knew that expression. It was the look wealthy people gave when they realized someone poorer had entered their orbit. She turned quickly, desperate for escape, and nearly collided with a man standing near the edge of the dance floor. He looked older than the other guests, early 40s maybe, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly fitted black tuxedo without a single flashy detail. Calm, quiet. The kind of man who didn't need attention because the room naturally bent around him anyway. Claire swallowed hard before speaking. Could you dance with me? Just for 1 minute. Please. The stranger studied her carefully. His gray eyes flicked once toward Ryan, then back to her face. There was no mockery there. No impatience. Only observation. Like he noticed things other people missed. Claire suddenly became painfully aware of her simple black catering uniform and the loose strand of blonde hair falling near her eyes. My ex is watching, she admitted softly, and I really don't want him to see me standing here alone. For half a second, the stranger said nothing. Around them, laughter echoed beneath crystal chandeliers while servers carried trays of lobster bites and glasses of $1,200 wine. Claire almost apologized and walked away. Then the man slowly placed his untouched drink onto a silver tray, passing nearby. Of course, he said. His voice was low, steady, impossible to read. And as he offered her his hand beneath the golden ballroom lights, neither Claire nor the crowd gathering near the dance floor had any idea they were watching one of the most powerful billionaires in Manhattan step into a story that was about to change all of their lives. The orchestra shifted into a slow jazz melody as Ethan Calloway guided Claire gently onto the dance floor. Around them, the ballroom glowed beneath layers of crystal light that reflected across polished marble like water. Conversations softened. A few curious eyes followed them, mostly because Ethan carried himself with the kind of quiet authority people instinctively noticed even when they could not explain why. Claire tried not to look directly at Ryan, but she could feel his stare cutting across the room. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Up close, the stranger beside her smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive cologne, subtle enough to feel effortless. His hand rested lightly against hers, respectful, steady, grounding her in a moment that already felt unreal. You do not have to look so terrified, Ethan said calmly. Claire let out a nervous laugh before she could stop herself. Easy for you to say. Is it? He asked. His voice carried no arrogance, only curiosity. She finally looked at him fully then. There was something unusual about his face. Not movie star handsome. Worse, the kind of face built from composure, intelligence, and years of being obeyed. The kind that made people straighten their backs when he entered a room. I am sorry, Claire said quietly. You were probably trying to enjoy your evening, and now you are stuck pretending to rescue a stranger. Ethan's expression barely changed. You assume I do not enjoy rescuing strangers. The answer caught her off guard. For the first time all night, the knot in her chest loosened slightly. Nearby, waiters floated through the crowd carrying silver trays lined with champagne flutes that sparkled beneath the chandeliers. Beyond the towering windows, Manhattan glittered in the darkness like another galaxy made of steel and light. Everything about the evening screamed wealth. The kind Claire had spent years serving but would never belong to. You work here? Ethan asked after a moment. Claire nodded. Temporary event staff. My agency sends me wherever they need extra people. And your ex? She glanced toward Ryan again. He was still watching, though now his smile looked strained around the edges. The brunette beside him whispered something into his ear, but Ryan barely reacted. He used to tell me none of this mattered, Claire said softly. Money, status, fancy parties. Then one day it suddenly mattered more than I did. Ethan absorbed the words in silence. Claire expected pity, maybe awkward reassurance. Instead, he asked, and what did that teach you? She blinked. Nobody had ever asked her that before. Not her exhausted mother working night shifts cleaning office buildings. Not the collection agencies calling about medical bills. Not the landlords threatening eviction notices. Pain, in her world, was supposed to be survived quietly. That some people only love you when life is easy, she admitted. Ethan's jaw tightened almost invisibly. The music slowed further around them. Claire noticed then that several men near the edge of the ballroom had started glancing toward Ethan with subtle recognition. One older investor in a navy tuxedo actually paused mid-conversation, staring openly now. But Ethan ignored them completely. His attention remained fixed on Claire, as though the rest of the ballroom had dissolved into background noise. Across the room, Ryan finally started moving toward them. Claire felt her stomach drop instantly. She recognized that confident stride. It was the walk Ryan used whenever he wanted control of a room. The brunette clung to his arm like a trophy as he approached beneath the gold chandelier light. Ethan noticed Claire tense immediately. His voice stayed calm. You are safe, he said quietly. Simple words. Yet something about the certainty behind them made Claire believe him. Ryan Mercer stopped a few feet from the dance floor with the smooth confidence of a man who had spent years believing charm could erase cruelty. The brunette at his side tightened her grip around his arm, her sequin gown catching the chandelier light like shattered glass. Claire immediately felt the old instinct rise inside her, the one that told her to apologize for taking up space. Ethan must have sensed it because his hand remained steady against hers, calm as stone beneath rushing water. Ryan let out a low laugh as the music continued around them. Claire, he said, drawing out her name like a private joke. I almost did not recognize you without an office cubicle and discount coffee in your hand. The brunette smiled politely, though her eyes scanned Claire's catering uniform with open amusement. Around them, several nearby guests subtly slowed their conversations. Wealthy people loved entertainment as long as it happened to someone else. Claire felt heat climb into her face again. The humiliation was familiar. Ryan had always known exactly where to press to make her feel small. I am working, Claire answered quietly. Clearly, Ryan replied. His gaze shifted toward Ethan with mild disinterest. And who is this? Ethan met his stare evenly. Someone enjoying the music. Ryan smirked. Careful, Claire. Last time you started chasing rich men, it did not work out too well for you. The words landed softly but carried the sharpness of a knife hidden in velvet. Claire's stomach twisted. She remembered sitting beside Ryan 3 years earlier eating dollar pizza in a tiny Queens apartment while they planned a future neither of them could afford. Back then, Ryan used to kiss her forehead and promise they would climb together. Then came promotions, networking dinners, luxury clients, and suddenly Claire became something inconvenient. A reminder of where he came from. Ryan. The brunette murmured carefully, sensing tension now. But Ryan was performing. Claire recognized that too. Men like him became cruelest when they had an audience. Actually, Ryan continued with a careless grin, you should thank me. If we had stayed together, you never would have learned resilience. A few nearby guests chuckled quietly. Claire lowered her eyes toward the polished marble floor because she refused to let him see tears forming. The orchestra played on beneath the crystal chandeliers while servers drifted through the ballroom, carrying trays of smoked salmon and champagne that cost more than Claire's weekly grocery budget. Luxury had a strange way of making humiliation feel elegant. Ethan finally spoke. His voice remained calm enough to silence the nearby laughter almost instantly. Do you always confuse cruelty with confidence? Ryan blinked slightly, caught off guard by the question. Ethan did not raise his voice. He did not posture. Somehow that made him more intimidating. Ryan straightened his jacket with a dismissive smile. Look, man, I do not know who you are, but Claire and I have history. History does not give you permission to humiliate someone, Ethan replied. Simple words. No anger. Just truth delivered with the weight of absolute certainty. Ryan laughed again, though less comfortably this time. You sound like one of those motivational podcasts. Ethan's expression never changed. And you sound like a man terrified people will remember where he came from. The sentence hit harder than a slap ever could. Claire saw it immediately in Ryan's face. The tiny crack beneath the confidence. The insecurity he spent years hiding behind tailored suits and expensive watches. Around them, conversations began fading completely now. Guests were watching openly. Across the ballroom, two older executives near the investor tables suddenly noticed Ethan more carefully. One of them nearly dropped the drink in his hand. The other whispered something urgently under his breath while staring directly toward the dance floor. Claire noticed none of it. She was too busy staring at Ethan in disbelief. Nobody had defended her like this in years. The tension spread across the ballroom like smoke beneath the chandeliers. Claire could feel it in the sudden quiet around nearby tables, in the way waiters slowed their steps, in the curious glances now fixed entirely on Ethan and Ryan. Somewhere near the orchestra stage, a wine glass clinked softly against marble, the sound unnaturally loud inside the growing silence. Ryan forced out another laugh, but it no longer carried confidence. It sounded thin now, defensive. You talk like you know everything about people, he said. Ethan adjusted his cuff calmly. No, I simply pay attention. Claire noticed then that several men near the investor section had completely stopped their conversations. One silver-haired executive stared toward Ethan with widening eyes before immediately straightening his posture. Another whispered urgently into his wife's ear while glancing between Ethan and Ryan like he was watching a train approach broken tracks. Ryan remained oblivious. His pride was too loud for awareness. He looked back at Claire with that same polished smile she used to mistake for kindness years ago. Honestly, Claire, I was trying to be nice earlier, he said. But this whole dramatic pity act is embarrassing. You could have just moved on like an adult. Claire felt the words hit old bruises inside her heart. Not physical bruises. Worse, the invisible kind left behind by months of feeling unwanted. She remembered standing in their tiny kitchen while Ryan packed expensive suits into garment bags for networking events she was suddenly no longer invited to. She remembered him saying, "You do not fit into my future anymore," while refusing to meet her eyes. Some heartbreaks did not explode. They slowly erased you piece by piece. Ethan studied Ryan carefully, his expression unreadable beneath the ballroom lights. Interesting, he said quietly. Ryan frowned slightly. What is? You speak about her as if she was a burden instead of a person. The brunette beside Ryan shifted uncomfortably now. Even she seemed to sense something dangerous moving beneath Ethan's calm exterior. Ryan scoffed. Look, man, with all due respect, relationships end. Claire just took it harder than most people. Claire's chest tightened instantly. Shame flooded through her before she could stop it. That was Ryan's gift. He could make cruelty sound reasonable. Ethan looked toward Claire then, and for the first time all evening, his composure softened slightly. You work tonight while carrying all this? He asked quietly. Claire tried to shrug it off. People still need rent money when they are heartbroken. Ethan held her gaze for a long moment. Something unreadable flickered behind his eyes then. Not pity. Respect. Across the ballroom, the atmosphere changed suddenly. A sharply dressed man near the stage nearly rushed forward before stopping himself. He whispered something to another executive, who immediately turned pale. Within seconds, several important guests had started watching Ethan openly now. One older woman even lowered her champagne glass with visible shock. Ryan finally noticed. His confidence faltered slightly as he glanced around the room. What is going on? He muttered. Ethan ignored the question entirely. The orchestra shifted into another slow melody while the ballroom lights reflected across crystal and gold. Wealth surrounded them from every direction, But Claire had never felt poorer than she did standing there in her plain black uniform beside women wearing gowns worth $10,000. Ethan seemed to notice that too. His eyes moved briefly toward the name tag pinned to Claire's sleeve. Temporary staff. The words suddenly looked cruel beneath all the luxury. Tell me something, Ryan, Ethan said calmly. If Claire walked into this room wearing diamonds instead of a work badge, would you still speak to her this way? Ryan opened his mouth, but nothing came out immediately, because everyone there already knew the answer. Ryan's face tightened beneath the chandelier light. For the first time since he walked across the ballroom, he looked uncertain. The silence around them had become heavy now, almost physical. Conversations had stopped completely at the nearest tables. A few guests pretended to sip champagne while openly listening. Others simply stared. Wealthy people spent their lives studying power, and instinctively, they could feel it shifting direction. Ryan forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. Look, this whole thing is getting ridiculous, he said. Claire and I broke up months ago. She moved on. I moved on. End of story. Ethan remained perfectly calm. People who move on peacefully usually do not humiliate each other in public. A quiet murmur passed through the crowd nearby. Claire felt her chest tighten again, but this time it was different. For years, she had gotten used to swallowing embarrassment alone. She had forgotten what it felt like when someone stood beside her instead of stepping away. Ryan noticed the crowd watching him now, and panic began slipping through the cracks of his polished image. He straightened his tuxedo jacket again, an unconscious habit Claire remembered from every stressful moment during their relationship. He always adjusted his clothes when he felt small inside. You are acting like I committed some horrible crime, Ryan snapped. Claire knows how hard I worked to build my career. I could not drag someone upward who refused to grow with me. The words landed like ice water. Claire lowered her gaze instantly. Even after everything, part of her still blamed herself. Ethan noticed. He noticed everything. His voice became quieter somehow, and that made the ballroom listen even harder. Tell me, he said to Ryan, what exactly did she fail at? Ryan opened his mouth immediately, then stopped, because there was no good answer. Claire worked 2 jobs. She spent nights helping her mother recover from surgeries while balancing overdue bills and impossible schedules. She had sacrificed sleep, comfort, pride, everything. Her failure was simply that life had been cruel to her. Ethan took one slow step closer. Not threatening, just undeniable. Did she betray you? Ethan asked. No. Did she stop caring about you? No. Did she abandon you when things became difficult? Ryan's jaw tightened visibly now. No. Ethan nodded once. Then the only thing she lacked was money. And you decided that made her unworthy of love. The words fell into the ballroom with the clean precision of glass breaking. Claire saw several nearby women exchange uncomfortable looks with their husbands. One older investor slowly removed his glasses, staring at Ethan with growing disbelief. Across the room, event managers had started whispering nervously into headsets. They recognized him now, or at least they thought they did. Ryan laughed suddenly, sharp and defensive. Who are you supposed to be? Some philosopher billionaire. The second the words left his mouth, the atmosphere changed. Not dramatically, quietly, like air pressure dropping before a storm. Several executives near the ballroom entrance froze completely. One man nearly choked on his drink. Another whispered, "Oh my God," under his breath while staring directly at Ethan. Claire noticed the reactions this time. Her pulse quickened instantly. Ethan simply looked at Ryan with the faintest trace of disappointment. No, he answered calmly. Just someone who learned a long time ago that character matters more than status. At that exact moment, the ballroom doors opened again. A sharply dressed woman in a navy evening gown hurried inside, carrying a tablet against her chest. The second she spotted Ethan, relief flooded across her face. She crossed the marble floor quickly before stopping beside him with visible respect. "Mr. Calloway," she said carefully, "the board members and investors are ready for your speech whenever you are." The entire ballroom went silent. The silence that followed felt enormous. It swallowed the music, the conversations, even the soft clinking of crystal glasses somewhere near the bar. Claire stood frozen beneath the chandelier light, staring at Ethan as the words echoed through the ballroom. Mr. Calloway. The name rolled across her memory instantly. Ethan Calloway, founder of Calloway Global, billionaire investor. owner of one of the largest tech and infrastructure companies in the country. A man whose face appeared on magazine covers beside headlines about billion-dollar mergers and government contracts. Claire's breath caught painfully in her chest. Ryan's expression collapsed in real time. The confidence drained from his face so fast, it almost looked frightening. His skin turned pale beneath the ballroom lights while his girlfriend slowly released his arm, suddenly understanding she was standing beside the wrong person in the room. Around them, guests straightened immediately. Men who had been laughing moments earlier now looked nervous. Respect moved through the ballroom like a wave. Quiet. Immediate. Absolute. Ethan turned calmly toward the woman holding the tablet. "Thank you, Vanessa," he said. "Give me 5 minutes." "Of course, sir," she answered quickly before stepping back. "Sir." Another word that changed the air. Ryan swallowed hard. Claire could actually hear it in the silence. "Mr. Calloway," he stammered, forcing out a weak laugh. "I had no idea it was you." Ethan looked back at him evenly. That is usually when people reveal who they really are. The sentence landed harder than any public humiliation could have. Ryan opened his mouth again, searching desperately for recovery. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "Claire and I were just joking around. We have history together." Ethan's gaze never shifted. "Yes, she told me." Ryan glanced around the ballroom now and finally saw what everyone else already understood. Investors, executives, event coordinators, all watching him, judging him, measuring him, the same way he once measured Claire. The irony sat in the center of the room like a spotlight. Claire felt dizzy. Her heart pounded so loudly she barely heard the orchestra beginning another soft melody near the stage. Ethan Calloway had spent the last 15 minutes defending her while she treated him like a stranger, helping her survive an awkward moment. Heat rushed into her cheeks again, but not from shame this time. Disbelief. "I am sorry," Ryan said suddenly, turning toward Claire now. His voice sounded careful, rehearsed, artificial. "I should not have said those things earlier." Claire stared at him quietly. For years she had imagined this moment. The apology, the regret, the realization that he had hurt her. She thought it would heal something inside her. Instead, it felt empty. Because his apology had arrived only after Power entered the room wearing a black tuxedo. Ethan seemed to understand that too. "An apology without sincerity is just self-protection," he said calmly. Ryan lowered his eyes instantly. No argument this time. No smug smile. The ballroom had become too honest for performance now. Nearby, a group of executives began whispering quietly among themselves while glancing at Claire with sudden curiosity. Not because she had changed, because the status of the man standing beside her changed how they saw her. Ethan noticed that immediately, and something cold flickered briefly behind his composed expression. He turned toward Claire then, softening again. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Nobody had asked her that tonight without wanting something in return. The gentleness of it nearly broke her heart. Claire nodded too quickly, blinking hard against sudden tears. Ethan studied her for another second before offering his hand again beneath the crystal lights. "Then let us finish the dance properly," he said. And as the orchestra swelled softly around them, the most powerful man in the ballroom led a catering worker back onto the dance floor, while an entire room full of wealthy strangers watched in stunned silence. The orchestra played softer now, almost reverently, as Ethan guided Claire across the center of the ballroom. Every eye followed them. Claire could feel it in the air around her, the weight of attention pressing against her skin like heat beneath the crystal chandeliers. But something had changed inside her during the last few minutes. Earlier, she felt exposed, small, humiliated. Now she felt seen. And somehow, that was even more terrifying. Ethan moved with quiet confidence, one hand steady at her back, while Manhattan glittered through the towering windows behind them. The city lights looked endless from up here, rivers of gold stretching through darkness. Claire had spent years cleaning office buildings where men like Ethan made decisions that shaped entire skylines. She never imagined one of them would look at her the way he did now. Not with pity, not with amusement, with attention, genuine attention. Around the dance floor, executives whispered carefully among themselves. Investors who commanded billion-dollar portfolios suddenly looked nervous about saying the wrong thing within Ethan Calloway's hearing. Ryan stood frozen near the edge of the ballroom, completely forgotten by the room he once tried so desperately to impress. The same people who laughed with him 20 minutes earlier no longer met his eyes. Wealth could be cruel that way. Loyalty shifted toward power, like flowers turning toward sunlight. Claire noticed Ethan glance briefly toward the crowd before looking back at her. "You are thinking too much," he said quietly. Claire let out a small, nervous laugh. "I am dancing with a billionaire in front of half of Manhattan. That sounds more stressful for me than for you." She looked up at him in surprise, and for the first time that evening, she saw something unexpected in his expression. Humor. Subtle. Dry. Human. It softened the sharp edges of his powerful presence for just a second. Claire smiled before she could stop herself. Ethan noticed immediately. "There it is," he said softly. "What?" "The smile you have been trying to hide all night." The comment hit her harder than she expected. Claire lowered her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by how carefully he observed people. Most men noticed beauty first. Ethan noticed pain. The orchestra shifted into a slower melody while couples drifted across the marble floor beneath hanging crystal lights. Expensive gowns shimmered like liquid silver. Cameras flashed near the investor tables. Somewhere behind them, servers carried miniature desserts balanced on silver trays worth more than Claire's car. Yet none of it felt as overwhelming anymore. Not while Ethan stood beside her, making the entire ballroom feel strangely quiet. "Why were you really here tonight?" Claire asked carefully after a moment. "Men like you do not usually wander around events alone." Ethan's gaze moved briefly toward the crowd. "I wanted to see how people behave when they think nobody important is watching." Claire absorbed the answer slowly. Suddenly, the evening made sense. The simple tuxedo, the quiet observation, the way he studied conversations instead of controlling them. Ethan was not attending the event. He was evaluating it. Evaluating people. "And?" she asked softly. "What did you learn?" Ethan looked directly at her then. That kindness becomes rare when status enters the room. The honesty in his voice stunned her. There was no performance left now. No billionaire charm. Just exhaustion hidden beneath elegance. Claire realized then that Ethan looked lonely. Not physically alone. Worse. Surrounded by people and still isolated inside it. Across the ballroom, Vanessa approached carefully again, tablet still pressed against her chest. "Mr. Calloway," she said gently. "The press and board members are waiting. The investors are getting anxious." Ethan nodded once, but did not immediately step away from Claire. Instead, he looked at her with that same calm intensity that made the entire room disappear around them. "Would you do me a favor?" he asked quietly. Claire blinked in surprise. "What kind of favor?" Ethan's expression softened again beneath the chandelier light. "Stay for my speech." Claire stood near the back of the ballroom after Ethan disappeared toward the stage with Vanessa beside him. The moment he stepped away, the atmosphere around the room transformed completely. Executives straightened their jackets. Investors hurried toward reserved tables near the front. Reporters adjusted cameras beneath the chandelier light, while hotel staff rushed to refill crystal glasses and realign silverware with nervous precision. Power had entered its visible form now. Claire remained frozen beside one of the marble columns, still trying to process everything that had happened. Her hands trembled slightly against the black fabric of her catering uniform. Just an hour earlier, she was carrying trays through the crowd, praying her ex-boyfriend would not notice her existence. Now the most powerful man in the building had asked her to stay for his speech. Across the ballroom, Ryan stood isolated near the bar. The brunette beside him had quietly disappeared into the crowd several minutes earlier. Claire almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Several guests who had eagerly laughed at his jokes earlier were suddenly too busy to acknowledge him now. One investor even turned his back completely when Ryan attempted conversation. The cruelty of social status had finally turned in the opposite direction. Claire looked away. She no longer wanted revenge. That surprised her most of all. A soft chime echoed through the ballroom speakers. Conversations lowered instantly. Ethan stepped onto the stage beneath a canopy of golden light, while cameras flashed across the room like distant lightning. The giant projection screens behind him illuminated the Callaway Global logo in silver and midnight blue. Claire had seen that logo before on skyscrapers, construction sites, airports, and news broadcasts. Seeing the man behind it felt strangely unreal. Ethan stood at the podium calmly, one hand resting near the microphone while hundreds of wealthy guests focused entirely on him. Yet despite the luxury surrounding him, he somehow looked detached from it all. like a man wearing power instead of enjoying it. "Good evening," Ethan began, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the ballroom. Silence settled instantly. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of growth, investment, and success. He paused briefly, scanning the crowd. "But I learned something more valuable before this event even officially began." Claire's pulse quickened. Near the front tables, several executives exchanged nervous looks. Ethan continued calmly. "People reveal their character most honestly when they believe someone has no power to offer them." The ballroom became so quiet Claire could hear the faint hum of the city beyond the towering windows. Ethan's gaze moved slowly across the room. Not angry, not theatrical, just honest. "I built my company on innovation," he said. "But innovation means nothing without humanity. Wealth means nothing without decency. And success means absolutely nothing if achieving it requires humiliating other people." Several guests lowered their eyes immediately. Ryan looked like he wanted the marble floor to open beneath him. Claire felt emotion rise suddenly in her chest because Ethan was not just speaking to investors anymore. Somehow, impossibly, he was speaking to every invisible person who had ever stood quietly in rooms like this trying not to embarrass themselves. Ethan rested both hands lightly on the podium. "Earlier tonight," he said, "I watched a woman working twice as hard as anyone in this ballroom carry herself with more dignity than people worth hundreds of millions of dollars." Claire's breath caught painfully. Nearby guests turned subtly toward her now, realizing exactly who he meant. Heat rushed into her face. Ethan looked directly toward the back of the ballroom then, toward the catering workers standing beside the marble column, toward Claire. His expression softened almost imperceptibly beneath the stage lights. "Status can buy attention," he said quietly, "but kindness earns respect. And those are not the same thing." For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then slowly, one person began clapping. Another joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom erupted into applause so loud it echoed against crystal chandeliers and glass walls overlooking Manhattan. Claire stood completely still in the middle of it all, tears shining in her eyes, while Ethan Calloway looked at her not like she was invisible, but like she mattered. The applause continued long after Ethan stepped away from the podium. It rolled through the ballroom beneath crystal chandeliers and gold-painted ceilings like distant thunder, powerful enough to make Claire's chest ache. She stood near the marble column, unable to move, while wealthy strangers looked at her with expressions completely different from the ones they wore earlier that evening. Respect had entered the room wearing the face of a billionaire, and suddenly people discovered kindness they had ignored before. Claire did not know whether to laugh or cry. Probably both. Guests approached her cautiously now. Women in designer gowns smiled warmly. Executives who would never have noticed her existence hours earlier suddenly thanked her for inspiring Mr. Calloway's speech. One investor even shook her hand as though she belonged there all along. Claire answered politely, but inside, something felt strangely fragile. Because she understood the truth now. She had not changed overnight. Only the way powerful people framed her had changed. Across the ballroom, Ryan quietly slipped toward the exit alone. No one stopped him. No one followed him. The room that once rewarded his arrogance had abandoned him the moment someone more powerful revealed his character publicly. Claire watched him disappear through the golden doors and felt something unexpected settle inside her chest. Peace. Not victory. Not revenge. Just peace. The orchestra resumed softly while servers floated through the crowd carrying miniature desserts and fresh champagne. Manhattan glittered outside the towering windows like a sea of stars beneath the midnight sky. Claire finally stepped onto the balcony for air, escaping the overwhelming attention inside. Cold spring wind brushed against her cheeks as she wrapped her arms around herself and stared down at the city streets nearly 50 stories below. Yellow taxis moved like tiny streams of light through the darkness. Somewhere down there, ordinary people hurried home from long shifts, worried about bills, exhausted from life, invisible to rooms like the one behind her. Claire understood them more than she ever would the ballroom. "There you are." Ethan's voice arrived softly behind her. Claire turned slowly. Without the stage lights and applause surrounding him, he looked different again. Less like a billionaire. More like a man carrying years of quiet exhaustion behind steady gray eyes. He stepped onto the balcony beside her, loosening his tie slightly as the city wind moved through his dark hair. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt peaceful instead of awkward. Ethan leaned lightly against the balcony railing overlooking Manhattan. "You disappeared before I could thank you," he said. Claire blinked in confusion. "Thank me?" Ethan nodded once. "Most people become very careful around me after they learn who I am." His gaze drifted toward the skyline. "You treated me like a person before that happened." The honesty in his voice hit her deeply. Claire studied him quietly beneath the soft glow spilling from the ballroom behind them. For the first time, she realized how lonely power must be when nobody speaks to you without calculating something first. "I almost asked you to dance with me for the wrong reason," Claire admitted softly. Ethan looked at her. And what reason would have been right? She smiled faintly through lingering tears. "Maybe because I liked being near you." A slow warmth softened Ethan's expression then. Not dramatic, not cinematic, real, human. The kind of smile that belonged to a man who rarely allowed himself one. Music drifted softly through the open balcony doors behind them while the city shimmered endlessly below. Ethan offered his hand toward her one final time beneath the Manhattan skyline. "Then next time," he said quietly, "dance with me because you want to." Claire looked at his hand for only a second before taking it. And somewhere beneath the crystal chandeliers, the billion-dollar speeches and polished marble floors, two people who spent most of their lives feeling misunderstood finally felt seen.